I have no idea what's going on here today, but as long as there's food, No, I'm just kidding. Hello, and how are you? And welcome to our little corner. And my friend, Wayne Miller, how are you today?
Fine, thanks, Gordy.
We're in room 112, not too far from where we've interviewed you a couple of times in Special Collections at the Feinberg Library on the campus of Plattsburgh SUNY. And Polaris is here, and it's not a submarine, is it?
No, and it's not a star, and it's...
or any of the above. What are we doing here today?
Well, we are unveiling our online web-based service of information about the North Country. And this is an accumulation of 30 years' work, not all by me, very small part of it by me, that will lead people to newspaper articles, magazines, maps, photos, and a variety of information about the North Country, about the Adirondacks and Lake Champlain Valley. And they'll be able to find that information from wherever they are at their desktop PC at home or their local public library or anywhere in the world where they have access to the internet. They'll be able to identify information that we hold here and that they can also obtain through their local libraries. Now, other libraries in the area hold much of this material, the printed material, and through interlibrary loan, any public library in the world can obtain copies of most of this material for you.
Wow. A long time coming, but it's about time that we let people in the world know about us, huh?
Well, that's the motivation is to make this available to people. Not only all the students on campus here and researchers in the area, but anyone anywhere. We have people who come from all over the country to literally to research using the tools and the materials we have here, and this will give them a little better idea of what we have and give them a jump start on their research before they travel here.
Every time you and I chat, people meet me on the street and say, "Where is that place? Is it really as good as you say it is?" And I say, "Yeah, we haven't even begun to scratch the surface."
Well, Feinberg Library is in the center of the campus at Plattsburgh, and we are our official mailing address is Draper Avenue. That's the street that runs right behind the library, and we're on the ground floor. Anybody in the library can direct you to Special Collections, and we hope that anyone who does have an interest in researching the history or the geography or the geology or medicine or any of the other topics that have been important and are important in this area will stop by and use what we have.
And this collection is being added to almost every day of the week. I brought 4 interviews I had done with people over 100, one gentleman 104 years old that I did about 20 years ago. I brought parts of a journal a wonderful 84-year-old woman from Woods Mills did about life as a timber lumberjack's daughter back in the early part of this century to add to the collection, and that's what happens.
Yes, we literally add dozens of items every day. We are adding thousands of entries to the catalog every year. So this is, we continue to collect. History is yesterday. History is today.
Oh, I love it. History is tomorrow. And
That's right.
So listen, what are we going to expect here today in a few minutes?
Well, we're going to have a demonstration of Polaris and a little bit of thank you for some of the many people who participated in making this happen. It's a very simple thing on the screen and belies how complicated it is to get it working and what's behind it. So President Judson will be welcoming those who attend today, and then Dean Oberman, Dean of the Library of Information Sciences, Information Services section, will be talking about some of the people who helped put this together, and then I'll give a little demonstration. And you can eat the whole time, Gordy.
Just keep those lips moving. We'll do that, and we'll let you get back to your public, and we'll talk to you when this part of it's over. Okay, Wayne?
Thanks, Gordy.
Thanks again.
Polaris, which is really a wonderful new indexing system, a very rich database that has been constructed over many, many years in Special Collections. I'd like to introduce President Judson, and then I'll be back to talk to you.
Thank you, Cerise. I'm going to tell you a lot about Polaris, and then she can explain what it is I just said. Good afternoon, and welcome to this occasion, which recognizes the inauguration of an outstanding service, new service. The Polaris Plattsburgh Online Archival Retrieval Indexing Service has its roots in the 1960s, when Special Collections staff began to index a variety of regional and local newspapers for information on the North Country. Up until quite recently, this article-level indexing was only available to researchers, students, and community users by visiting the Special Collections and using the card catalog. Today, we're unveiling a web-based electronic access tool, Polaris, that provides easy access to this rich and unique resource database. Today, from your home or office, in Plattsburgh or anywhere else, Polaris will provide you with over 20,000 entries to articles on North Country interests from 20 regional newspapers and more than 100 journals and magazines. In addition, indexes to pamphlets, photographs, manuscript collections, maps, and tapes have also been included. Presently, the indexing focuses on materials from the last 6 years. However, there are an additional 60,000 entries that await conversion to electronic format when time and money permit. Today marks the first steps toward turning this incredible local resource into an easy, accessible one for all who want to use it. Congratulations and thanks to all of you who have developed and initiated this wonderful new resource and service. Congratulations.
Thank you, Judd. Just a few other things that I need to say about Polaris. Polaris is truly about using technology to make information more accessible to those who need it. And who does need it? Our Plattsburgh State University students, our Plattsburgh State University faculty, our area school students, our community members, our reporters, our genealogists, our researchers from all disciplines from around the world. Indeed, Polaris is a milestone for Feinberg Library Special Collections. It is our first foray into providing global access to the rich indexes of newspapers, magazines, journals, pamphlets, and maps that have been meticulously indexed for over 30 years by Special Collections staff. The dedicated staff that began this work in the 60s had no idea that one day that resource would be available electronically to everyone who has access to the internet. Yet, they knew the value and importance of painstakingly indexing local newspapers and regional magazines for articles about Lake Champlain, the Adirondacks, and the North Country in general. I must say a special thank you to some of those staff with whose work has really contributed to make this possible. Among those are Joe Swinier, Ida Jacques, Glenn Coles, and Phyllis Wells, all who had worked in Special Collections. And a special thank you to every other student and staff member that have passed through Special Collections over the last 30 years who have also contributed to this effort. For the last 5 years, Mike Burgess, our assistant in Special Collections, has continued this very important work. Converting paper records to electronic ones is not the easy task that some would have you believe when you read newspapers and articles. Indeed, this project took the combined efforts of librarians, library staff, and computer staff over a period of 3 years. It started with Wayne Miller's vision that this important resource should have broader access. In order to realize this vision, Wayne enlisted technical support from Tom Higgins, our supervising programmer analyst, Bob Gertsch, our senior computer operator, and Dave Anderson, our web administrator. Carla Hendricks has also played an important role by providing advice and leadership to Wayne. And Linda Bruno, our keyboard specialist, too, shouldered the difficult but essential task of data entry, which she continues to handle with good cheer. Finally, a thank you to Sylvia Boudreau, Assistant Professor of History, who gave Polaris its name. I can't tell you enough how this is the very first step to a much bigger electronic resource that we want to develop over the years ahead. Today, citations, tomorrow, full-text documents, we hope. Now, Wayne Miller, our Special Collections librarian, will give you a quick tour of Polaris and then give you an opportunity to plan it yourself and discover its richness. Wayne?
Thank you, Cerise, and I'm glad so many of you were able to attend today. I'm just going to give you a brief demonstration of the database and a few hints as to where to find it and what some of its capabilities are. So if you there are, all of these machines that are here are already set to the Plattsburgh homepage. If any of the rest of you would like to come and sit at a machine, just push the monitor button on, and you will be at the Plattsburgh homepage, and we'll show you how to get to Polaris. Is Library and Computing Services, and that's a hot link. So you simply click on that, and that brings you to the divisional page. As you can see, this is Library and Computing Services page. On there you choose the first selection, which is Feinberg Library Services. And this brings you to an array of services available, including Polaris. If you just click that link, it brings you to the search page. On the search page, there is a brief description of what Polaris is and what it contains. There's a more detailed description of that if you click the About Polaris link. Further, you will see a description of some of the operators, some of the little devices that can be used to zero your search in on exactly what material you want. We are talking about a large database that will become much larger, and we'll show you some examples of that in just a second. Before I go there, I would also like to point out to you that there is a Special Collections homepage which does have a link to Polaris, as well as a description of Special Collections and our hours, and some other local online information services that we are providing already. One is a Clinton County Cemetery Registry. This is very useful for genealogists trying to locate ancestors that have spent some time in this area. And we have also digitized and included our manuscript collection index of all of the manuscript collections that Special Collections owns, and this contains detailed information about what is in each of those collections. But back to Polaris. When you're searching, this and most search engines, there's an old saying in computers, garbage in, garbage out. The better you can identify exactly what information you are looking for, the more precisely you will retrieve information that is useful to you. And I'll just show you an example of how it works. We just type in a search term. I've typed in Beekmantown. And thankfully it's working this afternoon. We never know with computers. Once in a while we have a glitch, but not today. And the search engine has retrieved 90 articles with the word Beekmantown in them. As you can see, it includes things on the school budget and water district, lots of things. Now, 90 articles is a lot to look through. Let's say that we wanted something about Beekmantown history, but we weren't particularly interested today in anything to do with the school district. So let's just try Beekmantown and history. And from 90 articles, we narrow it down to 4 articles. Okay? And the kinds of articles that we get, the citations, this is a newspaper article from the 1872 Plattsburgh Republican entitled Northern New York Historical Society Papers. And from the subject tracings, we can see that it has something to do with Benjamin Moore's about history and, of Chazy and the frontier and pioneer life there, as well as Beekmantown, and it has a couple of other named individuals. When we click on the article title, what information is given to us first, it starts off with call numbers. In this case, because we're talking about a newspaper article that is on microfilm, it gives you the microfilm roll number for Feinberg Library. So that number is only useful in Feinberg libraries, but other area libraries have microfilm of the Press Republican. This happens to be an article from the May 4th, 1999 edition about the Scouts' project to save history for others' use, and it has something to do with the Heritage Trail. So from looking at the subject tracings, we can get a pretty good idea of what the article's about. We can decide whether it's something we want to look at or not. We have the publication date and the page and the column numbers, so we can go right to that article in the microfilm. I'd like to show you one other search. And let's move into the Adirondacks. So I type in Adirondack. The longer it takes, by the way, the more articles it's retrieving. 796 articles have the word Adirondack in them. As you can see, they are of a variety of subjects, but the only thing they have in common is that the word Adirondack is present in each of them. Now let's narrow that search down a little bit. Let's say we want something about the Adirondack Park, but we don't particularly today want to look at things. Well, let's just see how many we get with Adirondack and Park. We start off with 796 articles. Oop. What did I type wrong? Well, let's get rid of the and try Adirondack Park. Doesn't like that. It's not what it was doing for me a little while ago. Well, let's try Adirondack, but not the Park Agency. So we will eliminate the term agency from the list. Adirondack Park at 121. The 796, with to take out the agency, is a 697. Okay. Let's add if we have Adirondack Park but not agency, we have 23 articles. And the kinds of information that are in here, we will take a look at this first one, which is a map. The Land Use and Development Plan, published in 1973 by New York State. It gives you the size of the map, 37 by 49. And in this case, you may find this information. It's a printed map. You may find it in another library or museum, but you know that it will be housed, a copy of it will be housed in special collections. And of course, there are other kinds of information. Environment could be big business. This is a Press Republican article from last year. We also have Adirondack Park Centennial, another. Now this says folio. We have a hard copy of this newspaper, the June 6, 1992, a 24-page supplement to the Press Republican commemorating the centennial of the Adirondack Park. So that could be obtained at least at special collections and perhaps other places. Now this is also an article on the Press Republican talking about the founding this year of a new newspaper, the Adirondack Explorer, which is published in Saranac Lake, which we are also collecting. And there will be indexing in the database for the Adirondack Explorer. That essentially is the search engine. There are a number of other operators that are noted on the search page that you can use to qualify your search terms. And I hope you will all take an opportunity to try the search engine out. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. No personalized research, but well, I want to thank you all very much for coming today, and I'd like to turn the podium back over to Cerise.
I invite you all to spend a few minutes and try Polaris for yourself. I think you will find it a fascinating opportunity to really begin to see the power of a web-based system such as this. It really is going to provide access in a way that we've never been able to do before. And again, I want to underscore that this is the tip of the iceberg. We've got 20,000 citations in there. We have 60,000 more ready to go when time and resources allow us to do this. And once it's completed, we hope then to move on to a bigger and more powerful projects as well, bringing these resources to the world. Thank you all very much for coming, and please join us for some punch and some light lunch as well.
Well, the hoopla is over for the time being, but our cameras haven't stopped. Wayne and I tried very hard to finish up all the food. After the new, unsuccessfully, they took it away, and they took us away, kicking and screaming. We're back in Wayne's office in Special Collections. We've been in this area before. But first of all, I want to thank you for an impressive presentation today. The people who attended were duly impressed.
Well, I'm glad for the turnout, and it's always nice to be able to show the results of work when you're kind of working on your own and behind the scenes, and this is true for all the other people that participated in this process. It's nice to be able to come out with a product you can actually show to people, and they can appreciate that it has some value.
We spend a lot of time promoting what you do here on a regular basis. Again, we haven't even begun to scratch the surface on the materials that are available and what an amazing resource it is. People asked very interesting questions on a daily basis. Some you can answer, some you can't, but the fun is trying. There are a lot of our viewers, I'm sure, that are not computer literate, and they have no idea what we've been doing here today. Just before the camera started, you explained to me exactly what process is underway when somebody starts searching on Polaris. Explain that in layman's terms for us, will you?
Well, when you get to the search screen, you're actually talking to a piece of software called Cold Fusion.
Where do these names come from? I love it.
I think I think they've got a special group of people sitting in a back room somewhere, and Cold Fusion actually is a pretty appropriate name for this software, because this will allow the user to ask a question. The software then goes into a database, finds the answer, makes a web page on the fly, and posts that, and that is your answer. So it's creating a web page on demand with your answer to your specific question. And it does it in a matter of a few seconds. So it's an impressive piece of software. A number of places around the country use this. I first saw it because Cornell University, which has done a great deal of work putting full text of books and manuscripts online as part of a national effort to create a national digital library. Cornell uses Cold Fusion for, they've got a big African art collection that was, I think, the first thing that they used with images of various paintings and sculptures and things. And they use this Cold Fusion so that the user can say, give me Nigerian sculpture, and Cold Fusion will go into this database and pull out the information that meets the search criteria and create a web page answer for you. So that was where I first saw Cold Fusion and began talking about it around here. There are other software packages out there that do similar kinds of things, but this is the one that this campus ended up buying and was first used on the main Plattsburgh page so that you could search the Plattsburgh website and look for admissions information or a particular professor's name or web page. And now we're using the same piece of software and adapting it to our needs. The data itself, we are actually entering the data into an Oracle database, again, a brand name. Oracle is one of the big database creation companies, and Oracle has been the backbone of all of our on-campus business systems. So all of the course information, marks and everything, all of the registrar's records, the financial records of this whole institution are in this Oracle database on a large computer over the administration building. So we're using a little corner of that machine's capacity to store our data, but that isn't in a form that can go directly onto the web. There is a little text-based search engine that was created just so we could take a look at some of the data as we put it in. It's not particularly easy to use. It's not pleasing to look at. It's slow, and it's not available on the web. So we needed this cold fusion to create the link between the Oracle database and the public. And that's what we've created with some few minor glitches that we'll be making improvements. And of course, as we said before, we'll be continuing to add all of the indexing that we have that's not part of the database now. There are about 20,000 entries in there now, and another 60,000 to put in, plus that we continue to create each day.
Where will it go ultimately?
Well, as long as Special Collections is here, I think since this task has been deemed important since the beginning of Special Collections, it's not going to become any less important. So the indexing will continue, and as Dean Oberman mentioned in some of her remarks, the next step is to get the full text of some of this material online. Now that's an even bigger
Can't even
job.
imagine how long that would take.
Well, and the problem is deciding what is going to be of enough interest to actually mount it on the web. And part of the answer will be, because this is a very time-consuming process, part of the answer will be what materials funders might be willing to give us some money to hire help to accomplish the conversion. Now, what's online today has all been done within the context of Special Collections regular work and what's available on campus. We have not had any grants for this per se. There, of course, have been people who've donated to Special Collections and to the college over the years, and some of that money has been used to support Special Collections to buy the materials. But the indexing and the regular business of Special Collections, the college pays for out of its regular operating budget. And so I think it speaks well for the commitment of this institution for community service, because about half of the people who use Special Collections are people from off campus, literally from all over the world. And we're getting more and more queries online. So, beside the researchers, well, in the past month we've had researchers writing books in here, one from the University of Delaware, another retired professor out of Bowling Green who's doing a book on the Battle of Plattsburgh, spent several days here. I regularly answer questions. Well, right now I'm conversing electronically and providing copies of manuscripts for a lady in California who's researching her family, and we have a collection of manuscripts. It's a family that was involved in the Ausable Chasm and the hotel there. And we have the family papers here, and so we've been making copies of some of that to allow her to get a better understanding of her family's past.
Now let's just talk about how this will make a researcher's life a little bit easier. It eliminates one step when you have this indexing online.
Well, it eliminates the step of physically having to come to special collections to identify the materials that might be of use. We're only open 23 hours a week, and right here in Feinberg, the microfilm of the newspapers that we are kept upstairs are available something in excess of 80 hours a week. So there's a good deal of time that our students and our staff here who might be doing research don't have access to the indexing, but do have access to the materials. So this allows them access 24 hours a day from their office or dorm room. It also allows people who live anywhere in the region or anywhere else to identify materials. Plattsburgh Public Library, for example, has a microfilm of many of the same materials that we have. We index things like the Malone Telegram, which Weed Library in Malone has microfilm of. The Adirondack Daily Enterprise, which Saranac Lake Free Library has microfilm of, and so on. So there are other locations that own the same materials, but we have the only indexing. Plus, there's one other advantage to the online version of the catalog. When you're looking in a card catalog, you can look for one search term at a time. You can look for Plattsburgh, or you can look for churches, or you can look for railroads. But if you want to find out if there were any railroad churches in Plattsburgh, if there were such a topic, you can use all three of those terms in searching the online catalog, as well as I was showing in the demonstration, eliminate some part of your hits by using not statements, or broaden your search by using or statements. This is something called Boolean algebra, Boolean logic, and most databases today allow you to refine your searches that way. So like the other online services, the other online databases that are out there, this database allows you to get a greater degree of specificity in defining exactly what you want. Get rid of the chaff and zero right in on the good stuff.
How long has Polaris been online?
Well, we started, it actually has been in operation for about 2 months. Excuse me. But we wanted to, in the industry, they call it beta testing. Before you go public with something, you want to kick the tires and drive it around the block a few times, make sure that it does what you hope it will do. We wanted to make sure that it was understandable and functional. And just today, as a result of the demonstration, we found a few little things that we want to make changes to make it function better. So it really, the page has been there, but it's been invisible until this past week when we activated links between the Special Collections page and Polaris and the Feinberg Library page in Polaris. And you will find links from other places popping up from other North Country websites to Polaris. As time passes, we already got a couple of places as a result of the demonstration today that want to add links, and we're very happy that we've got it out there for people to use, and the more easily people can find it, find their way to it, the better. Now, you mentioned before that many people may not have much experience with internet, and I just put in a plug for all the public libraries in the area, that many of them already have public internet computers, and there's currently a program underway with the help of Senator Stafford. The public library system, the Clinton Essex Franklin Library System, is preparing to launch a major program to get all of the libraries, all the public libraries in the North Country online. So basically, if you're inexperienced, go to your public library. If you don't have a computer, go to your public library. There are people there who can help you identify what resources online might be useful, including Polaris. They can then help you obtain copies of the materials that you might find pointed out in the database. And I would just underline that the database we have on there are just indexing citations. As we were mentioning before, that the full text in many cases is not available online, at least not yet, and so your librarian will help you get the full text of the material.
Anybody who's ever done any research, no matter how shallow the research is, one small object in a community, knows that this is a tremendous asset as it is today. I can't imagine how great it's going to be in the future.
Well, the internet's a great place, and I think we're going to have to pedal fast to keep up.
You're right.
There's new stuff every day, and new developments, new well, the hot term, I hate to use hot terms, but the functionality of the various resources that are out there keeps improving, and we're going to have to keep up. Change is a constant, and we're going to be continuing to do our best to make it work better, make it look better, have more in it, and we just hope that it will be something that does prove useful to a lot of people, and we hope that anybody who uses it, that any of your viewers who have a chance to use it, if they like it or they don't like it, they find a problem with it, I hope they'll let me know so we can keep building it better.
Fine-tune it?
That's
Yeah.
right, that's right.
Well, there's so many ways to use it, and it just boggles my mind. I was watching Calvin in between times when I was up trying to grab some extra chow. He was in there looking for some of the things that he was interested in, and it's great. It's a great game to play.
Oh, yeah.
To get, never mind some of the prepared games. Get on there and search for something that you're interested in. Something that's of interest to you in your community. Everybody loves a little bit of history. Some of us don't like to study it. Some of us like to just have it doled out to us piecemeal. On Polaris, they can get a start on genealogy, check the cemeteries in Clinton County according to the old cemetery records. They can look around to some of the things that we're going to try to do today because people show their interest in just when we throw out a name like Hotel Champlain or the history of the D&H railroads in the North Country, the Battle of Plattsburgh, which we're all talking about these days. Yeah, Wilder down, yeah. Every once in a while, we see the couple of programs that we've done down there, and I can always remember how exciting it was for me to visit that site for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Now we can find out information about it.
Well, we hope that's what'll happen, and I think you bring out a good point. It's one thing to sit in a lecture or read a full book on a subject that you may be more or less interested in. I'm always reminded of my youth when I used to be very upset that my elders would make me listen to information they wanted to give me when they wanted to give it to me, as opposed to when I needed it.
Sure.
And I think that's one of the beauties of the internet, that when you have a specific question in your mind, something comes up in conversation, you watch a show, you read a book or a newspaper article about a particular subject and it piques your interest, then you can get online at that moment. You don't have to wait until you're over in Plattsburgh or over in Malone to the Wilder farm. You can, at the moment, from your desktop, if you have an internet connection, you can research that information. You can get answers to your questions when you are interested in them, when your attention is there. So yes, I think that's one of the main values of this kind of service.
Yeah, I know so many people who do a little bit of research every now and then who would never have thought to go to their public library to look something up in the past. You mention a phrase in conversation, I'll check it out on the web tonight, right?
Yeah,
I'll
that's
check
right.
it out. You do it, he brings you that little piece of information. You exchange a little piece of information for him, and this just makes the horizon bigger.
Well, and I think in combination with email, now you and I have been having an email conversation about some overlapping memories, and I think that's the kind of conversation in this day and age when People are spread out, people are busy. There's a sense of loss that we may not take the time to write a letter to one another, put pen to paper, or even make a phone call. Obviously, that would be a more personal thing, but the reality is email is here, it's quick, it's easy. You and I exchanged half a dozen correspondence in the past month. If you had to wait for me to write you a letter, Gordy, you'd still
Or
be
vice
waiting.
versa.
You'd still be waiting.
True.
That's just the way it is. So with the data that's available here, with electronic mail, so that somebody who doesn't know how to use it or isn't able to get a result or does identify some information that we might have here, they can email me, and I can say, yes, we have it here. Do you want a copy of it? No, it's not something, it's too big to copy. You're going to have to come and look at this, 60-inch square map. Whatever the circumstances are, people can maybe avoid a trip here, or at least know exactly what they're going to be coming for, that indeed there is something here that's of interest of them, or to them, that will help them answer their question, conduct their research, whatever direction they're
There's
going.
bound to be something every one of our viewers, no matter how old or young, no matter where they're located, is interested in this facility.
Well, it's a
While
story
you
of
were
itself.
out getting ready after your news conference, we were looking through old atlases. I looked over and I saw a book on Baird clocks. I just happened to have one in my house. I was leafing through, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Well, I think that's right. We're talking about our own history here. This is the record of what we and our predecessors have done over the past several hundred years. And what we are creating here with Polaris is a roadmap of that. Just as you were looking at an atlas, that doesn't show you every house and who's inside it, but it shows you the roads and it might show you the structure.
Found his plot of land.
Well, that's and so with a map like that, a road map like that, you can find your way to a particular place. I was after the demonstration earlier, I was talking to the Plattsburgh City Clerk, Keith Hercolo, who was mentioning a search that I helped him with at much earlier stages that he's been working on for a few years. And actually, he ended up getting some information from the Jersey City Public Library after a phone call down there to the archivist that helped him identify a house that's no longer there on a street that
The exact house.
the exact house.
And you got to know Keith Hercolo to know how important things like this are to him. He and I have the liveliest, most colorful conversations about things because we both appreciate how it is to be on the quest and then to find it.
Yeah.
One little tidbit, it's like people searching for their genealogical roots. You find one little tidbit and you're so happy. It may take you a week.
Or may
But
take
look how
you a
long,
year.
3 years for him on this particular search.
That's right. That's right. And this is he's doing this for somebody else. He's trying to help somebody else, and it starts from his job duties. But this is, of course, way beyond the basic tasks of his office. And he, on his own time, at his own on his own devices, he has continued to follow this. And if Jersey City had an online service like this, it may have saved them a little bit of time. But there is a vast storehouse of information out there, much of it in public libraries, much of it in college and university libraries, historical societies, museums. A lot of it still in private hands. Now, that material
Don't you wish you had access to all this stuff in private hands just in Clinton County?
Well, that's the next step. I think the first step is to make sure that people have access to those things that are already in public hands. And that's where a tool like Polaris is beginning to address that problem of how do you know who has what? That's question number one. Question number two is, now that you know what we do have already in public hands, what things aren't in public hands that we should have available? And then we start addressing either borrowing, like I did just today from you, imposing on you to make copies of some tapes of interviews that should be available, will be important. Somebody in the future is going to appreciate all the interviews you did with 100-year-old Clinton County residents, and that information is history. Not only are the people in them talking about historical things, but the mere fact of that they lived for 100 years and who they are and what their lives were like is an important part of the history of this area that you have preserved, and now that we are putting it in a public collection, then anyone who has an interest in it has access to that information.
And as I listened to those tapes, I was moved by listening to them for the first time in 20 or 30 years, because now that's a part of my own history.
That's right.
History in the communications business here, and that's what makes it so interesting. And I was moved. I was listening to another tape I didn't bring for you, but it was a copy of a tape recording I did following the 300th reunion of my mother's family down in Tarrytown. I think I told you they came over as French Huguenots in the 1600s and early 1700s and settled near Sleepy Hollow, and many of them are buried in that cemetery. And we had this reunion. The Requa, R-E-Q-U-A families from all over the United States came to visit, and I made a tape recording of that and gave a copy to everybody who attended and hadn't listened to it since 1978. And we got partially through. We went to a service at the Old Dutch Reformed Church there in Tarrytown, and went to another ceremony, another dinner, and at the end they said, and now the benediction will be given by the Reverend Russell E. Little, my dad, who's been dead for many years. The sound of his big, deep, powerful voice giving the benediction, I was overwhelmed with emotion. And what a tremendous impact it had just on me, listening to my dad's voice from 22 years ago. You know, amazing.
Well, I'm also descended from French Huguenots. I don't know if we'd shared that information.
No, but it doesn't even surprise me now, Wayne.
So it's interesting to hear you talk about it. Now, that kind of information is information that's not only of interest to people in this area, like yourself, but is going to be of some interest to people all over the country. At least members of the family, if not...
Maybe I should have brought that tape.
Well,
They found the original homestead down there from the late early 1700s, and the professor from Pace University said this is one of the most significant digs, as far as a private residence, that's ever been done in New York State.
that is a very historical area. That's a nice one. We have it. See, many of the people who settled this area, for example, Beekman Town, is named after the original people who came from an area called the Beekman Patent, which is in central New York or eastern New York, and many of the first settlers of this area, the Platts, came from Long Island. Smithtown, Long Island, there's an original homestead there. We have some pictures of it. So when you talk about other areas, there are tie-ins, and while it may seem that it's more germane to another geographic location, it's going to be of interest to some people here. You don't know who it's going to be of interest to.
That's true.
And so if you can make the access tools, Polaris or whatever, available to a broad audience, then whoever is interested in it, wherever they are, whenever they're interested in it, they can identify the materials. And that's the name of the game, making access better.
That's wonderful. Now, let's give somebody a practical application. They're so inspired by this show that, what do you got? A battery. We'll be back in a moment. All right, we're all charged up again and ready to go, Wayne. Somebody's excited about what we've talked about. They want to get on the internet tonight and find the Plattsburgh webpage and get on the university and into Polaris. Give us a step-by-step.
Well, the easiest way to get there is to go to the main Plattsburgh page, the Plattsburgh State homepage, which is www.plattsburgh.edu. And that's the basic address. And you will get to this page that we have on the screen here. which allows you to find out about Plattsburgh State. If somebody's interested in applying, it gets you to the admissions page. There's a calendar on here, so all the events that are going on in campus is linked into here. And one of the choices is library and computing services, the fourth choice. So when you click that, you get to the library and computing services section page, which tells you about our division. And the first link on there on the right-hand side is Feinberg Library Services. So when you click that, you get to the Feinberg Library page. And from the Feinberg Library page, there is a link to Polaris. There is also a link on here to Special Collections. And we'll just stop by Special Collections page on the way in, where there is also a link to Polaris. Now, earlier you mentioned the cemetery records, yep. And in fact, here is a link to the Clinton County Cemetery Registry with information on how to search for names on the internet. Here we have our cemetery index. This is the McClellan Cemetery Index.
There's 3 littles on there.
Well, and that will tell you, okay, well, let's see, let's find the littles here. There we go, little. Okay, now this tells you that in the Ausable number 12 cemetery, and the Champlain number 6 and the Chazy number 9 cemeteries, the name Little appears on a grave.
Never would have known that until this very day.
So when you go back to the main page for this, the Cemetery Index page, it tells you not only who created this, Mr. and Mrs. Charles or Woody McClellan, who lived in Champlain, just did an incredible job collecting all this information and typing it up and making cross-references and indexes to the whole thing. But it says that if you want to have a copy of the full record, which will include all of the information that is on that plot, the inscriptions on the gravestone, all the names, the dates, in most cases a drawing of the stone itself. All that information is in our manuscript notebooks that we have here that were donated by the McClellan family, and we will, for a fee of a copying fee, we will make you a copy of those records and mail them out to you. Or you're welcome to come in and view the records here, copy down the information for free. So that information is all there. So that's one thing we have on Special Collections page. Another thing we have is a manuscript collection index that we have well over 100 manuscript collections in Special Collections. And many of them have fairly detailed collection guides have been prepared that will tell you what's in the collection, what years, what types of information. And we have digitized those guides and put them online. And I was mentioning the collection earlier that I'm making copies for a lady in California that relate to people who were very involved in the development of Ausable Chasm. It also included a congressman in the family, early congressman from this area. And that would be the Adgate papers. Now, in the case of this person in California, they were able to look at this collection guide, and they were able to read generally what's in it, who the people are, the main people that created this. They get some citations for some books and magazine articles that talk about the family, and then get a folder by folder description of the contents of that collection. Now, this is a fairly small collection, important but small. It has a total of 97 items in it. And this gives you the dates, the correspondence starting in 1796, going up to 1931. There are some pamphlets. There actually are some publications of some sermons that a clergyman and their family had given and had printed up. There's a folder of genealogical information and 2 miscellaneous items. Now, one of the items has to be in there is an admission ticket to a musicale from the end of the last century. These little pieces of family memorabilia that we keep right with the collections, because that's important to understand
yeah,
the history of
sure.
that family.
Isn't that neat?
We, I believe it's in this collection that one of the family members attended a medical school in Bennington, Vermont. And at the end of the last century, actually it was in the middle of the last century, and the way they ran it, obviously, when you registered for the course, you were given admission tickets for the lectures.
I think we ought to do that now.
So we have some of these little admission tickets that obviously the student would have to hand in to enter the lecture. So I don't know if they must have slept
Didn't
in.
go, or- Yeah, well.
That wasn't they weren't interested in gallbladders or whatever it was on that day. So that's the manuscript collection guide. And now Polaris, of course, is linked on there. And on this page, we also have links to other local history sources, and I'm fine-tuning that all the time. I've got a bunch more that I want to put on there. There's a New York State Railroad Station Society that this fellow is trying to get photographs of every railroad station in the state, used or unused, converted or not. And my brother, as a matter of fact, he's the one who told me about this site, because he was going along the Rutland from Moira and Brushton over through Moores over to Rouse's Point, and taking pictures of a number of the stations along the way that hadn't been photographed and added to the site, and he was taking pictures and scanning them.
Neat
And,
idea.
yep, electronically sending copies of these photographs to this fellow downstate who's doing the site. So that's one of the links I
Great.
have there to add. And we have some other genealogy links to a number of other resources there, and I've got some more to add to that too. But anyway, back to Polaris. And here is our search page, and that includes a description of, a very basic description of what is in the index. And there's also a link to About Polaris that will give you more detailed information about what is contained in the index. And then as we go down through, you will see that there is a fairly detailed description of exactly what operators we call them. I was talking about Boolean logic before, the and, or, not, and some other devices. One I'd like to point out to your viewers is what's called the wildcard, that you can use either an asterisk or a question mark if you're not sure how to spell Beekman Town or
Paisleyville,
Conshohocken or whatever. Yes, you can. If you're not sure if Shakespeare is PEA or PAE,
Nobody's sure. There's
So
so many different spellings of Shakespeare.
but most of us know it's SHAKE. And so you can put SHAKE and an asterisk, and a database, this or any other database that allows Boolean logic, Boolean searching, will pull up all of the Shakespeare entries. Now, this is also useful if you are looking for, let's say Adirondack, like as in Adirondack Mountains, or the Adirondacks with an S on the end. Rather than doing two separate searches, you type the beginning of the word, you use a wildcard, and you pull up all of the words that have that beginning, that root. So this is a good device to cover more ground, and make sure you include in your net all of the articles that are germane. Now you're going to get extra things, and that's where these other devices help you weed out and narrow in your search to exactly that stuff that you're interested in. But when you first cast your net, you want to cast it broadly so that you get all of the
If
material.
you're like I am, you're going to get waylaid with some subject you never were looking for in the first place.
That's half the fun.
I've
Half
done
the
that
fun.
too. That's great. Okay.
So we've got our search window here. We just click our mouse into that window, and the blinking cursor comes on in the search, and we can put in Battle of Plattsburgh. And we hope it pulls up things that have to do with the Battle of Plattsburgh. 39 articles found. There. So what we have are a list of the results, and these are short entries. To get the full citation, you merely click on the title of the article. Anytime you're online, for those viewers who haven't used the internet, generally when you have a term that is either in a different color, the words are in a different color, or they are underlined, that has some material behind it that linked to some other material. So we click on the Battle of Plattsburgh, and we get the citation, which tells us the microfilm roll number, MFD3, microfilm roll D3, upstairs in our periodical section. Tells you the date this was added, which is not of interest to most people except those of us who work on this. The title of the article is The Battle of Plattsburgh. It was published in the Plattsburgh Sentinel, January 24th, 1873, page 1, columns 5 to 9. So you can go right to the article because, of course, each roll of microfilm has 50 or 100 different issues of a newspaper on it. Now, the last thing, there may be, depending on the type of entry we're talking about, there may be some other information. If we have a map, it would tell you the size here under physical information. If it's something other than a newspaper, if it's a pamphlet or something else where there was a publisher that isn't obvious from, Plattsburgh Sentinel, kind of tells you who the publisher is, that information will be included. And the last thing down here are the subject tracings. And sometimes these can give you a lot of information. This is pretty straightforward, War of 1812 - Battle of Plattsburgh. From the title of the article, we could have assumed that unless there was some other battle that you and I hadn't heard of. Okay, so on our browser, that's the piece of software that allows you to view the World Wide Web. This happens to be Netscape. There's also the Microsoft Explorer, and there are some other ones out there, but those are the two main ones. We just hit the back button, and we're back to our list of entries. And if we want to look at other articles, now this is another article from the Plattsburgh Republican, 1840. Now, the subject tracings here are a little more telling. Not only do we have War of 1812 - Plattsburgh, but we have Alexander Macomb, who was a general at the Battle of Plattsburgh, also was involved in some land ownership, large tract, one of the large tracts in the Adirondacks called Macomb Purchase. There's a link to a Flag, that's Azariah Flag, I believe it's Azariah, who was also an historical character in our area, and Silas Wright, who was from the Canton area. In fact, the St. Lawrence County Historical Society is located in the Silas Wright House. He was,
No kidding.
yeah, he held a number of elective offices in, I believe it's in the U.S. Senate, and he held some New York State offices. I want to say he was governor, but don't quote me. I can't remember. So there are three named individuals in there that had something to do with the Battle of Plattsburgh who are people of note for some other reasons, and so they would be pointed out there. So that's what we do. We just go down through, and you can tell. And now most of the newspaper articles are only going to be on microfilm. It just physically takes up too much room to hang on to year after year of newspapers. Now here's one from 1998. We were just looking at a citation from over 150 years ago. That's even your house and my house couldn't hold all those newspapers. So we have to go to microfilm. It lasts as opposed to newspaper yellowing and falling apart. So we have that. Now this is an article from last year, and ideas emerged for 1814 Battle Center. And down here in the subject tracings, it tells us that Battle of Plattsburgh Interpretive Center is part of the subject covered in this article. And of course, we're familiar with the efforts locally to get that to be a permanent operation. Now, I know you were mentioning some other topics that you want to take a look at here, and you mentioned the D&H Railroad and Hotel Champlain. Now, well, let's just take a look for the hotel there. And see what we come up with. 27 articles on the, or 27 hits on the Hotel Champlain here. And the first one we've got, now this says file. This means that we have a clipping in our on our clippings file of an article for this one. The title of it is the Hotel Champlain. It's an undated publication. And from the looks of this, I would say this is probably there's maybe something published by the hotel, because we don't have a newspaper name and we don't have a date. So this might be a brochure or a broadside, something to relate, something that was printed, but not in a newspaper. So. Now, we don't have the full number of this on here. In this case, we're going to have to take one intermediary step and take a look in our card catalog to get the file number, because our file is actually several large file cabinets with 4 drawers in each cabinet and about 3 feet of stuff in each drawer. So we're talking thousands and thousands of clippings in the file section. So in a moment we could take a look for that. Now, for your viewers at home that have a printer attached to their computer, you can just hit your print button and you can print that citation or any of the other citations. And this is particularly useful if you're not living right next door to your public library, or not in the library when you're doing your research, to print out the citation, take it with you when you go to the library. You've got all the information right there. You don't have to worry about deciphering your handwriting or making a mistake in writing down dates or pages. And you've got it all right there. So we'll print that out and we'll take a look for that in a minute. In the meantime here, we can take a look at some of the other citations we pulled up. Now here's a Plattsburgh Sentinel article from 1889 saying that the name was selected.
Bless you.
And there's a named individual, G.E. Harney. Whether that person was the manager or had something to do with the construction, I couldn't tell you right offhand, but the fact that their name appears here says that they're a major player having to do with the hotel.
Harney was a famous name. We got a Harney Bridge right in Katyville. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You know, while Calvin was changing the battery, made an excellent point, Wayne, and that is sometimes just looking at the various items can give you a sense of the history before you ever delve into the actual transcript.
Well, we were just kind of checking out some of these citations here, and there are 4 articles that have to do with a famous visitor at the Hotel Champlain in 1897 when President McKinley spent some time there in the summer. And in the August 28, 1897 edition of the Plattsburgh Republican, there was an article entitled "Farewell to Bluff Point, the President Entertained." And obviously he's finishing up his visit. And you know, in the subject tracings, its name's William McKinley, who of course was President of the United States, later assassinated in Buffalo. And the Bluff Point Hotel, Hotel Champlain at Bluff Point, New York. And there were 3 other articles. Obviously, when the president comes to town, that's big news here. So here's one from August 14th that tells you he was here at least 2 weeks. So those of us who might want to complain about how long our current president goes to Cape Cod or wherever for, can look back and see that it was quite typical to spend a good part of the summer outside of Washington, for the president. And of course, in our area, we also have Coolidge's Summer White House up White Pine Camp outside of Paul Smith's. So the Adirondacks are not strangers to people in high places. The advent of jet transportation that changed tourism in general had that same effect. Presidents could climb on Air Force One and go to Aspen for the weekend skiing, as opposed to taking the train to the Adirondacks for a month. And if we go back a little farther, the first president through the area in the very early part of the 1800s had quite a different journey. Anyone who's familiar with President Monroe's visit to this area, basically traveling over the mud track that is the military turnpike now, and staying at Robinson's Tavern, and the descriptions of the rutted mud track that was the road in those days shows how far this area and transportation in general has come.
And don't you wish something had been done with Robinson's Tavern many years ago? Every time I go down the turnpike, I look on the right-hand side and see the remnants, overgrown.
Well, I think the good
The
news
old
is,
sign there that tells people what it is.
the good news is that there's a sign there, and that's not a state sign. That's a
Yeah.
local sign. That at least the knowledge that that place existed and the remnants of the building, what they are, and they're not just a pile of stone. They're something that's important in our history. Yeah, you're right. But we can't save everything. If we can at least save the memory.
You got it.
But I think it does point out to us that some of the historic buildings, whether they look a little shabby or not, and over in Malone, the Horton Mill has, over the years, it had just enough maintenance done on it to keep it standing. There are examples like that around the region. It's too bad there weren't more, but that makes the ones that survive all the more valuable. And we need to take a little special care and make sure they survive into the next millennium, even if that is as close as it is.
It's getting here.
What is it, 79 days or something like that?
Whatever.
Now, one other article I want to point out to you here, and that is about the end of the original Champlain Hotel. And that is from the May 28, 1910 edition of the Plattsburgh Republican, an article entitled Champlain Valley's Pride in Ashes.
It's quite a headline, isn't it?
And that was quite a fire. And of course, the story is that the D&H, who were owners and developers of that, rebuilt the hotel within about a year. It was really kind of a amazing thing that they went from ashes to reopened in a very short period of time. But of course, the story is that it never really regained its prominence, whether it was the interruption in the business or times changing. Here we're talking about 1910. Of course, we're closing in on World War I. We're talking about the advent of the automobile as opposed to train transportation being the primary conveyance, and of course the D&H Railroad ran right by the front door.
Not to mention the trolley tracks.
Well, the Plattsburgh Traction Company going out there, that's right. So people were more free to follow whatever roads existed and on their own timetable and turn off or stop whenever they wanted. So the built-in business that the railroad hotel co-ownership provided was not as much of an advantage. That may have played part of it. Just changing styles. It's probably a variety of factors combined. But that was a great era in this area. Presidents coming to summer here. We weren't talking about some dump on the side of the road. We were talking about a world-class hotel. That, of course, now is the site of Clinton Community College.
Many of our young viewers, especially now, may not know that bit of history we've given them today.
Well, this area is very rich in history, and You know, I'll paraphrase a biblical quote that you're never a hero in your own hometown. We often don't think of ourselves and our area as being as important, as historic, as rich in culture as other areas because, well, gee, we're just the little old North Country. We have nothing to feel second-rate about. This area, we are just starting to see the story of the importance of Battle of Plattsburgh get out, and how key that battle was to the northern tier, not just of New York State, but the northern tier of the United States, remaining part of the United States, and indeed the continued existence of the United States. Very few people are really aware of the importance of the Battle of Valcourt in the Revolutionary War that delayed the British for a year to give the Patriots a chance to get organized enough and get armed enough to win at Saratoga, which is generally considered the turning point in the American Revolution. So, I mean, this area and many other examples, we're talking the early iron industry, Essex County, Keysville, Willsboro area have contributed much to this country. Particularly, I'm thinking of the Civil War when the horse nails that kept the shoes on the feet of the Union cavalry came from there, and so an argument could be made that were it not for the horseshoe nails from the North Country, that the Civil War might have turned out differently. The Brooklyn Bridge being built with iron mined at Lion Mountain and forged in Chateauguay Lake, because that was the best quality high tensile steel available at the time. So I may sound like I don't mean to be preachy, but I don't think we appreciate what we have here and what's been here. So I think something like Polaris, to give people encouragement and help to identify some of this, I think it can't hurt.
It's really neat. Look at the conversation it's spawning just today. And here's the guy who helped to put it together.
Well, let's take one more look here. We mentioned the Delaware and Hudson now. And this is going to be a good practical example. Now, whether it's under Delaware or whether it's under D and H. Okay, well, Delaware gave us 37 hits. The Delaware and Hudson Canal Company, there's 2 articles, bid for the erection of the new Delaware and Hudson something. Let's see what that is. That's an 1885 article out of the Plattsburgh Sentinel about the Plattsburgh Railroad Station, of course, which still stands today. And we have a great picture on our wall with the hotel that operated across the street from that, operated by Paul Smith's. The building is still there, but the exterior's been changed quite a bit. But that's a good piece of history there. There's more Canal Company. Now this is an article about William Harper and George Parrott of Keysville. Now what do we have here? Railroads, Keysville, Ausable Chasm, and Lake Champlain. William Harper, George Parrott, Bridges, New York State, Ausable Chasm. Well,
The phone rang and we had to stop for a minute, but this is a very informal program. Well, you were looking to see what this was all about, and that's very interesting.
well, from the subject tracings, this would seem to be about the building of the railroad bridge over Ausable Chasm in 1889.
Maybe this will follow in with that research you were just doing.
Well, yeah, you never know. I don't see Adgate here, but if we got into the article, it's very possible it could involve something with that family. So that's our basic search engine here, and of course, when you have a search that brings a lot of articles up, you may want to further clarify what articles you want by adding a search term. So let's say Delaware and Chasm. And that should zero right in on just those articles that
One
deal with the
article.
chasm.
There it
And
is.
so there's
You
that,
got
there's
it,
that
the only
article.
one there is.
So if you had started off wanting to know specifically about the railroad and Sable Chasm, you could have used those two search terms and gotten to the one article that
But
meets.
these are hints for people searching the internet in general. There are a lot of things people can learn, and I know for first-time internet users, it can be frustrating. If you don't have a good search engine, or if your search is not specific enough, you can get very discouraged.
Well, that's not just for first-time people.
Yeah, I know.
It's a wonderful thing when it works, and it works the way you want to. Sometimes there are little hidden glitches. You're doing things you don't realize. The search engine each search engine works slightly differently. Each has their own idiosyncrasies. That's why it's usually worth your time to read the about sections to see what syntax is required, what grammar, what little devices they allow or don't allow to be used. Some databases use control language. That this is a free text searching here. That this looks at every word in the title, and it looks at every word in the subject headings. Now, the subject headings themselves are a control language. That there are only certain words that are used, and if you find one article that is a subject that you're interested in, and you then take that control language, that subject heading that would appear on that article, and pop that back in as a search term, you will get all of the articles that relate specifically to that subject. And this is true. This is a great tactic to use in any database you're searching. Now, there are some databases. There's a big educational database called ERIC that only uses control language. And there is a thesaurus, a list of words that they use to index materials. And you can stumble around in there for quite a while before you come up with the control language term, and then, boom, you've got tons of stuff. You've got, just literally millions of pieces of information in there. And it's federally funded. It's been around for a long time. It was a print resource, and then it was microfiche, and now it's online. And of course, here with so many people taking education courses, it's something we use quite a bit around here.
That's great.
Now, we found one article. I'll just take people through the process. We had this file citation for the Hotel Champlain, and we're not quite sure what it is, so we're going to do a little exploration. And our next stop will be our card catalog.
All right, let's go check it out. Now you're getting to the basics of library research that are very familiar to me, having spent a lot of time doing exactly what we did right here.
The dreaded card catalog.
The dreaded card catalog. All right, what have you done?
Well, we went in, we knew that the title of the piece was the Hotel Champlain, so we went into our author title portion of the catalog and looked for Hotel Champlain as a title. And we found a file entry for the Hotel Champlain for an undated piece, so I'm pretty confident that this is indeed the document that the indexing citation was referring to. And we've gotten a file number from here. And this will allow us to go right into the file and look at this information. But just while we're here, as long as we're going here, we may as well.
We found some other interesting
Yeah,
tidbits.
sure. There's things about the Hotel Champlain golf course. We got some pamphlets from there. And we have a pamphlet here from 1890 about the Hotel Champlain and its surroundings. For the season of 1890. It was published by a company, or printed by a company in Albany. And we'll just take down that number because it's in the files right next to this other one here. And we'll get that number and adjourn to the file room and pull the information.
Let's do it. All right, we're going to move right into the file room here and see what we can find, just to let people know how the room is laid out here and what we're going to do. And you think he was kidding when he told you the size of the files, huh? Well, here you go, folks. These are the archives.
Well, we're looking for file number 855. And in 855, we have 10 file clippings. We're looking for number 3. And here's a sheet on it's basically a history of the Hotel Champlain that was written sometime after 1969 because it talks about the beginning. Oh, I know what this is. Actually, I believe this was something that Pat Miranda, librarian over at Clinton Community College, passed along to us. They were doing some work organizing their archives and had a little bit of history awareness over there and put this together, and she shared a copy with this. I'm just going to look at the back. It doesn't give us any clue, but that's my memory of where that one came from. So that's why it's an undated piece.
Gee, what a beautiful piece of history. I could have used that, Calvin, a few weeks ago when we did a show up there.
Well, you didn't ask the right person, I guess.
Yeah, well, you know.
Now, we took down a pamphlet number, and the section over here just behind you, I just point out here, these are folios. These are the original newspapers. Now, when we were in the demonstration part, we turned over a folio of citation for an Adirondack Park Centennial insert from the newspaper that we held on to. But in here we have things like we have several newspapers reporting on the original Battle of Plattsburgh. So 1814 newspapers, of Albany and Boston, talking about McDonough scores great victory on Lake Champlain and the like.
Pretty neat stuff.
So most of what we save today are special insert kinds of things that have a lot of pictures that give a little bit of history. Because certainly we can't save every day's newspapers, so we're looking for those unique items.
Key stuff, yeah.
That's right. So let's take a look for that pamphlet. And that's pamphlet number 140. Okay. 140/7. And there it is. Free my hands up. And of course we keep things in acid-free envelopes to keep them from deteriorating, because acid has a way of migrating. So
look at this.
And this is a pamphlet. O.D. Seavey is the manager. The new superb summer hotel of the North, the Hotel Champlain.
Isn't that beautiful?
And of course this is going to be a list of services for the season 1890. And it talks about location, nice engravings. And there's a little notation here where you would normally have the publication information that says this hotel will remain open through October. So they stayed open for the leaves until the lake cooled down. It gives you views. There's a nice engraving of the hotel up on top of the bluff. What do we got here? I've got my weaker glasses on.
Oh, boy, here you go.
What's...
That's the bowling alley, and I never knew they even had one up there. You're talking little tiny print. He's putting me on the spot. The Hotel Champlain
Western
approach. There it is.
Okay, and we've got the bathing beach, and you can see from the styles that it was quite risque for those days. But it was not unusual for ladies to be in formal dress and be down and let the kids swim.
Yeah, you can see behind the college now where the remnants of the old stairs used to be going down the hill.
Right. And here's the Adirondacks from the Hotel Champlain Park. Some of the views and people admiring them. Those haven't changed much. And the porches. So a visitor could get a pretty good idea of what the lake looked like, what views you could expect. And then they're talking about, here's one of the cottages that they had in the area they would rent out. Here's a map with the railroad lines connecting. You'll notice no highways are mentioned on there. And the post office address for the Hotel Champlain, Clinton County, New York. And this last paragraph is under the management of Mr. O.D. Seavey, the executive head of the Princely Hotel Ponce de Leon at San Augustine. The new Hotel Champlain has promptly taken its place as one of the essential points in the complete northern tour.
Isn't that
And it in
neat?
fact was.
What a beautiful piece of history you have uncovered right here for us today. And it's like, I feel like Geraldo opening the
A little more inside
the
there.
vault. He found nothing, and we got a nice little juicy tidbit. Now, you had no idea what that was going to be when you opened it up, really?
Well, from the entry, working with it over time, you can kind of guess what kinds of materials it's likely to be, because I knew it was a pamphlet, and I had the time period, so I had a pretty good guess. But that's right. Unless there's so much here that even if I've looked at something before, I'm looking at lots of pieces every day, and sometimes I remember better than other days.
You're doing very, very well. You have so many treasures here. You mentioned a couple of very important things that I want to leave our viewers with. Number one, there are a lot of hidden things in people's attics, in boxes, where nobody gets to view them, and it would be possible for the whole world to know about them if people would donate their collections to your library.
Or let us, like you have been graciously making copies or allowing us to make copies. Now, sometimes you mention closets, and some people like to leave family things in
the
closets.
closets, yeah.
But remembering that at some point, the people who might be embarrassed by any personal information to be contained will no longer be embarrassed by it. Realizing that we will follow any donor wishes for restricting access, either to materials forever or for a certain time period. The main thing is to see that these pieces of history don't get lost forever. That it only takes one break in the chain, one person to decide to clean out the attic, all of Grandpa's old junk, and it's gone forever. I just had a fellow in here last month who picked up a map from the 1850s of Clinton County that his father had retrieved out of the dump. And he was looking for my opinion as to how he should go about preserving that information, preserving that map. It had the names of the household, heads of household, and all of the residences in Clinton County from 1853, I believe it was.
Something you didn't have before?
We don't have a copy of that. I know I was speaking to Addie Shields, the county historian, last week, or a couple of weeks ago, and she had seen the map. I'm not sure if she has a copy of it. Her opinion was that, her experience was that it wasn't the most accurate thing in the world, but if it's the only thing you've got to go on, it's a good starting place. So a lot of places could be the sources, attics, dumps, wherever, and anybody who wants help preserving it for their own use, and especially those people who are willing to share their treasures, we'd be more than happy to work with them.
That's great. Boy, what a great note to end on today. Wayne, thanks very much for all your work here, for inviting us in to upset your daily routine sometimes. Today it was part of inviting the public in and having them view the advent of this whole new system, Polaris, which is just now getting started, and this is terrific now and will be just amazing.
Well, thanks, Gordy. Always glad to see you.
And who knows?